Hi everyone, Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting, and this time we're talking about the very first game of the season for the Winnipeg Jets. They will play in Anaheim on Wednesday night, and joining me today is Sun hockey reporter Scott Billeck to talk about what we can expect from this Jets team. And Scott, I do believe that many people, not just in Winnipeg but around the NHL, have this team pegged as a Stanley Cup contender. Connor Hellebuyck certainly said that's what he expects of this team. Those are lofty expectations. How do you think this team will handle it?
Better, I think. And I think it's because they have a bunch of experience with this. This isn't the first time that they've been pegged as Stanley Cup contenders. This happened, a couple times in the past, and now they have the maturity. I think, and we've talked about this throughout camp. There's a sense that this team has kind of it's very cohesive at the moment. They know what they need to do. They know what's expected of them. They're probably very aware of this 2 to 3 year window that is ahead of them right now. And they have seemingly most of the pieces that you would need to put yourself in contention for a Stanley Cup. An incredible goaltender, a very good top six that should put up a lot of points. A defensive core that has been, completely morphed with the additions of Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon. These are all big pieces, and I think they have the augmented pieces. And one of those, and we'll see how long Cole Perfetti lasts. In my season preview, I think he's going to be a big part of this team, even as early as this year and in their playoff push. It's one of my predictions. But you were there this morning, Ted. Cole Perfetti will play in Game 1. What is your insight into that, and why was that decision made according to Paul Maurice?
Well, it was a very exciting moment, I'll say that, because it was fairly obvious that Cole Perfetti was going to play because he was out there on the third line with Adam Lowry and Jansen Harkins. But of course, you don't know it for sure. But then we saw him being taken aside by Paul Maurice, and they're having a chat. And what Paul Maurice said was, "Go inside, call your parents. You're playing tomorrow night." And I think it was a pretty special moment for both of them. And you could almost tell that it was a special moment for the whole team. Just real excitement to see a guy that's getting that opportunity. And he's not getting it just for fun. It's not a token thing here. This is a guy who had a very good training camp. And also 26 points in 32 games in the AHL last year. Silver medal at the World Junior Championship, gold medal at the Men's World Championship. He's had that incredible bonus of a year of not playing junior last year because his league did not play, the Ontario Hockey League, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And he got to go and play with men, as he said, as an 18 and 19-year-old kid. It was incredible value. And I think he's gained more maturity than most players his age have. And not only, personally, but also as a player. And it showed through in this training camp, and Paul Maurice has given him a shot. It doesn't mean he's even going to be in Game 2. There's a spot open because Mark Scheifele is out with his suspension from dating back to the playoffs last season. But it really is a great opportunity for him. I think it's an uplifter for the whole team, and it'll be really interesting to see how well he does because he is a special talent. Scott, what do you think about him?
Yeah, like you said, tremendous training camp. I watched him almost every day of the training camp, watched all the games that he played in. I thought he got better as each game went along, and really culminating in the game last week, I believe it was last Friday in Calgary, where, here's a kid who's not just making the easy decision on the ice, he's making the right decision on the ice. Some of those decisions are tough, and some of those decisions he's making in tight spaces where he's still stick handling the puck, making a nice pass, stick handling the puck, drawing a couple of penalties as he did. I mean, he makes all the correct decisions while on the ice and doesn't hinder his team. This is a 19-year-old kid who wouldn't have this opportunity unless the Jets pulled him onto the team. But most of the time, 19-year-old kids in the Canadian Junior Hockey League, because of the agreement between the NHL and that, don't have the option to go to the American Hockey League and don't have the option to play pro hockey. Cole Perfetti is going to get 2 seasons of that. And it's unfortunate for Saginaw, who is his team in the OHL, that they won't get to have him, but it's such a boon for the Jets to have this option to play him pro. And we've seen last year, 26 points in 32 games is very good for a kid who was 18 at the time, right? For half the season. And we'll see how that translates into this year into pretty much probably a full year in the AHL. Although I do see him being that sort of Cole Caulfield type in Montreal who can come in and be an injection of offense on maybe a third line, maybe even higher, depending on injuries and all that stuff. But I think he just has the skill. He's matured enough. And you talked about it. I mean, he played in the World Championship with men. He obviously played with Canada at the World Juniors. But those are all experiences that, especially the World Championship, that you don't get at that age. And so I think he's been just a tremendous player for this team. Had a tremendous camp, like I said, and is getting a tremendous opportunity on Wednesday night in Anaheim. And, that's big. And maybe we should talk about this. Connor Hellebuyck has made this before. Let's switch gears here. And you heard him today, the Stanley Cup contender. Where do you see it? I mean, I think that they are in that regard. I think they're going to battle for the top spot in the Central Division. And I think they're one of the top teams in the Western Conference. But where did you see it? And what did you take from Hellebuyck's comments today? Is that him being too overconfident, or is this a guy who was like, this is where I am, and this is where I think I can lead this team?
Yeah, not a hint of overconfidence from Connor Hellebuyck. I'd never read him that way. It's that's not really his style. I mean, he is confident. There's no doubt about it, and he believes in himself. But what you get the sense is that he believes in the team as well now. Maybe he always believed in the team, but he believes in it more because they made additions that made sense. The management of this team, Kevin Cheveldayoff, knew there was a window, and he knew he had to go out and get some pieces that would allow them to be successful in that window. And I think if you're Connor Hellebuyck and you're Mark Scheifele and you're Blake Wheeler and you're any of the other, Josh Morrissey, any of the players, Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor, any of those players, you're on a longer-term contract. You committed to this franchise, and I think you saw that Kevin Cheveldayoff is rewarding that commitment by bringing in players like Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon and making sure they re-sign Paul Stastny and just going for it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work this year. Even the Andrew Kopp situation on a one-year deal, they could end up losing him at the end of this year, but they're going for it. So they did it. And if you're any player, if you're Connor Hellebuyck, if you're any of those players, you have to appreciate that the team, the management, the coaching staff, everyone is saying, we're going for it. And I think that's, you would hope that that would work well in the Jets' favor. Of course, as Blake Wheeler said before, on paper doesn't mean much. It has to be shown what you can do. And they're going back into a tough division that they haven't played in for a year. There are some unknowns. It would be very interesting to see how this team starts out.
Exactly. Yeah, I think so. And I think, you get to play on that Western Conference kind of road trip to start. And you are playing some of the teams that are considered the weaker teams, the Anaheims, the San Jose's, teams that aren't expected to maybe push for playoff spots. Now you are going to play Minnesota at the end of this road trip. And that's a team, Kirill Kaprizov and his new contract, who took a step last year. And they're obviously in a bit of cap hell, as we'll call it, I suppose. But they're not a bad team and made some improvements in the last year, where we in Winnipeg and in the Canadian division didn't get to see a lot of that because obviously it was all Canadian division and COVID. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously we know that Colorado is going to be a very good team in this division. I think Dallas will be up there again. Not kind of sure where Chicago is going to be. They obviously added Seth Jones, big defenseman on the back end. Marc-Andre Fleury, last season's Vezina winner, they got essentially for free. So that could be a team that could also compete again. Not sure where Nashville figures in. We know that Arizona is not always, the best team, and they're obviously a new addition to the Central this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how that plays out. And but I think the Jets aren't the team that needs to be looking at what others are going to be doing anymore. Got to focus on yourselves. You have a competitive team. Go out there and prove it. Don't put yourself in the conversation that way. Put yourself in the conversation of, no, we are a top team, and that's the way that they should be looking at it. And I think that's where they're at. I think we saw it throughout training camp. This team has a completely different outlook than I've seen in past training camps. I've been around this team since 2013, about 8 or 9 years now. And this is, this goes back to the 2017, 2018 team, and even the 2018-19 team going into that year. Lots of confidence. But less maybe internal strife, if you want to call it that. There's no real distractions this year. And I think that is a massive thing for a team that is looking to make a push. And if it's not this year, it's got to be into next year. but trying to build that foundation that you can take a couple of runs at this thing. And I think they've done that this year, and we're going to see how it plays out, starting beginning tomorrow night in Anaheim.
Yeah, our colleague Paul Friesen even kind of compared it a little bit to what's going across town with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who won the Grey Cup in 2019 and are obviously the class of the CFL this year with an 8-1 record. We have yet to see that from the Jets, but you get the sense that there's enjoyment. There's something that it's fun to be around, and it's something that everybody wants to be a part of. That's exactly what you see with the Blue Bombers, and it's a big part of why they're successful. And I think a lot of that has to do with continuity in the coaching staff and in the management and in the leadership of the team. And obviously some injection of new blood as well. Obviously Nate Schmidt is a complete character and a different guy than you're used to seeing around here. He's like the anti-Blake Wheeler, but that's good for this team as well. And you can tell that they're having some fun. Of course, a few losses to start the season, they won't be having any fun at all. But you do get the sense that that they're kind of on a mission, and that they see this as a great opportunity. I do think that Central Division is going to be very tough. I don't think, there's just doesn't matter how good you are on paper. It's not going to be easy to just roll through that and get to the playoffs. It's still going to be a battle. Maybe there's an extra possibility for an extra playoff spot with the Pacific Division not being particularly strong this year. That would certainly be helpful. And honestly, it's just that you look at this team and you say, you got Hellebuyck, you got 6 very solid defensemen, you got a great top 6, you've got a great checking center in Adam Lowry, and I think people like the looks of the surrounding cast on that bottom 6 as well. Very different from what they've had in the past. Some guys with some talent and some scoring. Not sure how good defensively, but that will remain to be seen. And of course, the one big question mark for me, and I'll throw it back to you for this one, is Pierre-Luc Dubois. What is going to happen with him this season?
And I wrote in my training or my season preview, I think he has a good season. And the reason there's multiple reasons for this. One, last year is gone, right? So this is the chance where he has to still prove to it that he's a great player. But the trend before coming into Winnipeg last year was that he is a very good player. And he showed that, in whether it was analytics, whether it was on the score sheet, at the end of the night, all of those things. This is a guy who's put up points before and has been able to do it. Now he has a full training camp, and this was literally the whole entire training camp. They played him with Andrew Kopp and Nikolai Ehlers through all the drills, all that stuff. Consistency. He never had that last year. I mean, if you look back to it, he played with everybody, and he played at every forward position. They have him exactly, and so they have him at center, his position that he's played in the NHL. They have him with Nikolai Ehlers, who could be a threat to score 40 this year, if not more. Where do you think a lot of that's going to come from? Well, some of it will come from the power play, but we also have to remember that Pierre-Luc Dubois is also on the power play. And a lot of the 5-on-5 goals that Nikolai Ehlers scores, and this doesn't even mention Pierre-Luc Dubois' goal totals this year, but just Ehlers, everything 5-on-5, a lot of those are going to be assisted by Pierre-Luc Dubois. And we've seen it in training camp and in some of the exhibition games. There's a lot of brewing chemistry with these guys. And I think this is going to be a very effective line that can push the top line for top line minutes. And I'm not saying that, Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler aren't going to be the team's top line or whatever, but I think you could almost have a 1A, 1B situation. And just to go back to your point about the fourth line and all that, and even on defense, this year is so different because you actually have competition throughout the season. There's not going to be, it's not a situation where, part of your defense is plucked off the waiver wire. This isn't a situation where your next best forward is, I don't know, Matt Hendricks or somebody like that, right? Where it's an older guy who's just not skilled, doesn't have that oomph. No, now you have guys like Svechnikov or Harkins or Toninato. Those guys who can come into the lineup, even best lineup, let's throw him in there. Those guys are going to be continually pushing each other. One has a bad game. You know now going out there, having a bad game is actually might cost you your roster spot. It might cost you the next game, the next 5 games. It gives the opportunity for the guy behind you to take over. This is the same on defense and we'll probably use Logan Stanley in this regard. Well, you have a Ville Heinola. Now he might go down, but he can come right back up. You have to worry about Nathan Beaulieu, who could come back into the lineup, right? So there is, I don't want to call it a fear, but there's this awareness that there are guys behind you that are itching to get into that roster spot and want to take advantage of it if they can. And the Jets haven't had this for the past couple of seasons. We know how it's gone, and Connor Hellebuyck has lifted them in the playoffs in both of those years. But I really do think that this team, barring a spat of injuries, it is going to have a very good mix of guys really wanting to come into the lineup if they can, which really keeps the guys on their toes that are in the lineup, or guys that are in the lineup on their toes. And I think that's just a massive boon for this team that hasn't had it over the last couple of years.
All right, great stuff, Scott. Even if you are wearing a Red Sox hat, I think you know what you're talking about. So we will continue to do this with jet setting throughout the Winnipeg Jets season. Very exciting time with the season starting Wednesday night in Anaheim. For Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching Jet Setting on winnipegsun.com.